So the government got rid of USAID, and I'm in the camp that I'm happy about it, and I'll tell you why. So I'm here on the SBA website, right, looking at the scorecard, and as you see here on the scorecard summary, you look at all these particular agencies that got A plus, B ratings, right, and then USAID actually got a C rating. Now, for those of you who don't know about the SBA scorecard, the SBA scorecard is already on a weighted scale, right? So given the fact that they're already on a weighted scale, meaning that, let's say the high score was an 80 percentile, that means everyone that gets an 80 percentile more gets A, then those persons who get a 60 percentile essentially get B, right? Or C. So if you get a 60 percentile in the real world, that is an F. Do you understand? So in the real world, if you were measuring people's success based on the actual numbers, then USAID has a C. Now, remember, I'm the small business guy, so I'm here advocating for small businesses. I'm not advocating for a particular government agency or an entity. So now, just on the merit, right, because now we're talking about we are living in a meritocracy society. Based on the merit alone, they're getting an F. So again, if you were looking at who to cut, right, considering now, again, some of you guys live in a fairy tale world where you think we could keep everything and all the agencies and all the money and just keep drowning ourselves in debt. I get that. But if you had the option to choose between this list, this group on a list, and you looked at A plus, A plus, B, A, right? And then you see a C, that to me is natural that the C should be the one cut out. Let's just take a deeper dive and click and go and look at what they did right and what they did wrong. And maybe that will help us in some achievement. So let's look at here, going into the scorecard, and on 8A set-asides, they spent 2.13%. And 8A entity set aside 0.67%, HubZone 0.13%, service disabled veteran owned 0.07%, small businesses in general 6%, and then women owned set aside 0.62%. So that tells me that they did not even try. That says that they didn't even try to make their goals. They didn't try to make their numbers. They didn't even try to help small businesses. So what should happen to people that don't try? Should we reward them? Haven't we already learned from giving the kids just for showing up trophies, for not actually doing anything? Haven't we learned from that system already? So in my opinion, again, my humble opinion, I believe that people who don't try should be penalized. And if in fact we were saying that we want the agencies that are doing the best to rise to the top, then why should we be rewarding people that are doing the worst? We should be punishing them. And so they got punished. Now, that was not the government's justification for that. However, they still got the ultimate FAFO. You know what I mean? And so let's talk about, right, some of the things that I get it. What does USAID do? And yes, you want to save other countries. I understand that. Many of us have flown on airplanes before. And when you fly on an airplane, it says, put on your mask first and then put on the mask of your neighbor, right? And so again, unless you can put on your mask, you can't help other people. I believe that effectively, if we were to take the funds that were going here and redivert them back to, again, putting our mask on first, priorities for people here, then we could go out and help our neighbors after the fact. But until we've settled the things here in our home territory, then it behooves me that we would want to try to go out and solve other problems outside of there. I know people are going to complain. They're going to argue about it because you have your opinion, because you're going to say, well, no, let's go solve the world's problems first and then figure ours out later. That's not what it says on an airplane. Put your mask on first and then put the mask on others later. So again, multiple reasons why this agency should have been taken rid of, shouldn't have been gotten rid of. They probably should have done that a long time ago. But because there's people out here that have or that stand to gain financial benefits from this organization, from this agency, that at the very least, to me, reminded me of the movie War Dogs, right? So do you remember the scene in War Dogs where they went out and they won this big contract and now they're fulfilling the contract and then the guy gets greedy? You remember that movie, the scene where the guy gets greedy and he says, hey, this person is, by the way, we're already doing something wrong here, right? So we're already giving them materials that were made in China. Okay. So, but we're making a fortune off of it. And then we're paying someone to repackage these materials. Okay. But then the broker who did the deal is making a margin on top of us and we want to cut him out. And so, in my opinion, this is what's been happening. These people were making a mint over here, and they decided that they wanted to cut out the little guy. And guess what happened? The little guy reported them back to the feds that they were doing something wrong, and then the whole thing crumbled. And this, in my opinion, is a similar story. What I'm seeing now with USAID is that, look, they cut out the little guys. So I'm willing to bet that the same thing that happened in War Dogs, where the guy who was repackaging the boxes, he didn't get paid. He made a call and reported them. That's what happened with USAID. Someone said, look, these people are not doing what they say they're doing. They're not helping the people they're supposed to be helping. They're just taking the money and basically running rampant with it. And so somebody should look into that. And I'm willing to bet you that's the fate of what happened to USAID. And I'm okay with it. I'm fine with them, because at the end of the day, how many of you guys actually know anyone who actually benefited from those contracts? I want to hear from you. If you know someone that personally benefited from USAID contracts, then I want you to put it down wherever you're watching this content at, because I actually only know one person that was working on USAID contracts as a small business. And so I really, out of all of the thousands of people that I've met in my life along this journey, I know one person that worked at USAID. And recently I met someone who helped companies get contracts, but even she told me herself that she didn't help small businesses. She primarily worked with big organizations to help them win these contracts over here. And so at the end of the day, the only people, the small businesses, we didn't lose. And so we shouldn't be crying tears when we didn't lose. The big companies lost out, and the ones that have been taken advantage of the government tax dollar lost out. And so if it were me in office, I would be reverting that money, all the USAID dollars, back to small businesses and back to the community. And that's how you basically kill two birds with one stone. You get the benefit of helping the small business community, and you got rid of the burden of helping people that really, at the end of the day, were not ultimately the beneficiaries of it. A lot like the nonprofits. At the end of the day, basically, it was more of the same, which is big companies taking advantage of small businesses, benefiting off the government systems, which ultimately falls on all of us, the taxpayers.